with two cylinders up on top in that cylinder block. So you've got your smokestack, and you've got the horizontal boiler, and up on top you've got what looks like a box, but that's where the cylinder block is, and the pistons inside it. Now this roller's got a canopy, and rollers sometimes did have canopies, but the canopy never went past the smokestack. It covered everything right up to the smokestack. That's just distinctive about rollers. The other thing that's distinctive about rollers is, on the whole, they didn't have spoked flywheels. They had smooth flywheels, and occasionally they would be used stationary with a flat belt to drive things, but not very often. They were usually totally committed to road making or remaking of roads. So there they go around. The young man there is working very hard. See the steering by chain, so he's making his way around the compound arrangement. Now we'll move on, because suddenly we've gone massively up in scale to an absolutely magnificent showman's engine. The showman's engine was used by people who ran the travelling fairs, and what a magnificent beast. Really do have a close look. Right up on top, you see now this has a canopy that goes beyond the smokestack and out over a bracket that stands ahead of the smokestack, and on that big bracket stands a dynamo. And when this engine is stationary, it will generate electricity to drive the fairground ride. It will do that by putting a flat belt from the flywheel up onto the pulley on the near side of that dynamo. That will light all the lights around the canopy. And very often they can be coloured lights. These are plain lights, and it will generate the electricity for the ride. On top of the canopy you can see a long tube. Now that's a smokestack extension, and when it was stationary it would pull into the local village or town, and it would pull into the square, and very often the square would be surrounded by little two-storey dwellings, and it'd set off, and when it's generating the engine works hard, so there's a lot of steam, smoke, hot bits of stuff come flying out of that chimney, and if your windows are open in the bedrooms it blows straight in your bedroom. So people didn't like that, so the engine operators developed smokestack extensions. So when it's stationary, that tube, that pipe, goes in the top of the funnel, and that gives a bit more height and elevation to get the muck away. So now we've seen some real features. We've got a through canopy, smokestack extension on top, a bracket out in front of the horizontal boiler, and holding that canopy up, beautiful brass knurled rods, those big support columns. And that's absolutely right, and the engine is beautifully presented, coach painted, lined out on the flywheel and the wheels, front and rear, big brass bands, all polished up around the boiler. Now the showman, the successful showman, had the big engines, and he wanted to put on a display to say, look, I've got wonderful rides, and you'll want to ride on my engine. So there's a bit of showmanship going on here, and this was his advertising billboard. And when he travelled from town to town with an engine like this, pulling his ride and his caravan behind it, he was telling everybody who he was, and come and try my rides out at the fair. So a wonderful thing. Look at the size, the big diameter wheels on this, because when he was travelling, when he was going from town to town, he wanted to get there quickly. And these engines had gears, 3 gears normally, low, middle and high. You had to stop to change gear. And in high gear, even with its trailers behind it, an engine like this would travel quickly. They'd trot on. And so he wanted to get on, and he wanted to earn his money. So they are a wonderful example of the showman's engine. Next one up, please. Now, not on the same size, but nevertheless still a showman's engine. More of a showman's tractor, this, built by Garrett around the concept of the steam tractor, and we'll see some of those later. But nevertheless, you can do the commentary now. Canopy, front to rear, way beyond the smokestack, and in front of the horizontal boiler we can see the big dynamo. Up on top of the canopy we can see the smokestack extension, and look at the brasswork. There's a lot of it. So these guys, when they go up in the morning, not only have to clean the boiler, clean the smoke box, rod through the boiler tubes, then they have to light the fire, start getting steam up, and start polishing everything, because believe me, when these things are hot and running, all that brass burnishes. So you have to get out with your brasso and your polish and clean them up. So it's a long, hard day from getting the engine in working condition to putting it on display. And again, a very nice example. Large diameter wheels, front and rear. And again, on this one you can see the belly tanks. That's what looks like a square box between the front and the rear. It actually goes under the boiler, and it's an additional water carrying tank because on the road they use a lot of water. Next one up is a roller. Now this is towards the end of steamroller design, and it's called an advanced roller. And you'll have heard me talk about the compound engine, which has two cylinders, a large and a small diameter on top of the horizontal boiler. Well, when this little green engine comes round, you'll see that it's a twin compound engine. There are 4 cylinders with pistons in, 2 large ones, 2 small ones. And the idea of that is that when you go from rolling, going forwards on hot, wet tarmac to going backwards, you don't want any hesitation. Please, demonstration. No. The problem with the early rollers is they were single cylinder, and when you wanted to go from forward to reverse, you might actually the crankshaft might stop on top dead centre, and while you were reaching forward to rock the big flywheel to get it off top dead centre, you just sank it to the hot bitumen. Now this little Atkins engine owned by Atkinson's, and its name is, I think, Fred Richard, the little Wallace and Stevens engine, built in 1925, so